We're going to sound a little bit like a broken record as we keep telling you how important your work is to archive, and we're just going to say it many, many times because it's important. So as we've heard, stories of LGBTQ people and religious organizations, so that's all of you who are listening here today, these are often passed on in ways we might not think of, but they are vital to the historical context of our society. So in other words, what you are doing online matters. It matters now, and it will matter to future historians. And as we've seen over the past several years, but particularly this year, as Asati said, LGBTQ religious organizations and many other individuals and organizations, we've really continued our work in online virtual spaces. When it's not safe for us to gather in person, many religious organizations have used modern technology to connect to each other in previously unprecedented ways. So let's talk about that a little bit. I think Cody's going to put up a poll for us here if everybody wants to fill out. What does your organization use as far as social media platforms? And I can't see it, but is that poll up? I'm not sure if anybody else can see it either.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up now.
Okay, good. So, you know, if you are part of a religious organization or any type of organization, you know, answer on that basis. What social media platforms do you use? You can answer for yourself individually too, but since we're talking about archiving the organizational records, that's sort of what we're aiming for here. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to see the results once they're done. Probably. And if Cody's going to pop those back up there for us once you all have filled that out. I see we're having some issues. I'm looking in the chat here. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. Poll doesn't look like it's working. That's okay. So, I mean, really the intention of this poll is what I kind of wanted to find out is what are the most popular things that you all are using to connect with your people in whatever way that is, your religious organization, your other type of organization. And I have to tell you that Facebook is probably the most common thing that I have heard of and come across. So we're going to talk a little bit about Facebook, and I'm going to do a little demonstration of that today. But a lot of these other social media platforms are also pretty common and pretty easy to download your own content. So let's talk about that a little bit more. You know, we've said that it's unlikely that Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, any of those are going to go away anytime soon. But remember, there was a time before all of those platforms. There was a time before Facebook, if we can believe it now. So here's a good example. I had a Xanga blog like in the early 2000s, like probably 2006 to 2008. And there's a ton of really great content on there, if I do say so myself. Lots of comments, lots of friends connecting through that blog. And then like in the mid 2010s, maybe about 2015, Xanga just went belly up. You had an option to migrate your content to a different website if you wanted to. I did because I've always been an archivist at heart. But anybody who didn't do that, that content now is just gone. And so that's sort of a cautionary tale for why we're doing what we're talking about today. So over the summer this year, LGBTQ-RAN archivist Doris Melkmus started thinking about, actually before this summer, she started thinking in terms of LGBTQ religious history. What are you all doing online that is worth preserving? Right now, as we know, religious organizations are sometimes presenting weekly services online. You're organizing events online. You're posting pictures and videos and other content. In short, you all are continuing to do the community building, advocacy, and spiritual work that you do, and now it's all online. So over the course of this summer, Doris and I started talking to some of you, some of the organizations. We asked how religious organizations are using social media and online content and how they're preserving that content. We asked how much time religious leaders or staff might be willing to spend on preservation. We asked what kinds of resources or instructions would be most helpful in this area. And then we took all of that feedback and put it together with a bunch of our own research into digital archiving into the Archiving Digital Content Guide. I think Cody's going to put the link to that particular page in our chat here. This is what that page looks like. This is just a screenshot from the page. We wrote this guide to archiving digital content for the non-archivist, for religious or layperson leaders who want to preserve their online work. What we heard from a lot of these conversations that we had is that the instructions needed to be simple, easily accessible in terms of language, not filled with archives jargon or complicated instructions. We really wanted you all to be able to take these steps to download your own social media archives when you're able to, as often as you're able. The guide includes a fair amount of background information into how and why this preservation is done, again, in accessible language, and then step-by-step work instructions for Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and Flickr. I'm sad to say it doesn't include TikTok yet because I hadn't discovered TikTok at the time that we wrote the guide, but I have now, and I'm going to figure out how, if you're on TikTok, we can preserve that content too. The guide does include some of the ways that Asati talked about, that stories are told and shared, that the stories of overlooked giants are kept, like social media and in websites. It's important to note here that all of the instructions we've included are the free and easy sort of DIY version. There are companies that can do all of this for you. They can set up recurring save functions for any platform you ask them to, including your website. They range in price, but they are not free, not by a long shot. If this is something you're interested in, contact us, contact me or Doris. We can help recommend some options or talk through what it is that you're looking for. But this guide is meant to show you how to do this easily and for free. An overarching theme to this particular method is what material you can or can't access. Most, if not all, social media platforms pretty easily let you download your own content. It takes several clicks to get there, but there's generally no problem downloading anything that you do on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. Your posts, your photos, your videos, your profile. But it is much more difficult and more technically involved to get a record of what other people post, and that includes what they comment on, other people tagged in your photos. That's for privacy reasons, and it's intentional on the part of the social media companies, because the idea is that you are the owner of your information, but not others' information. So the instructions, which we're going to look at in just a second, and I'm not going to read to you, we'll walk you through how to download on your own your organization's information. So 2 things I want to say about that. We recommend that you set this up on a schedule, whatever schedule that is that works for you. It could be monthly, and that will make the process pretty short. If you do it every few months or once a year, it might take a little bit longer, but still not a very long time. The other thing we recommend is that the files that you're going to download from the different social media platforms, we recommend that you put them onto an external hard drive, just like Lindsay was talking about. The external hard drive is the modern day equivalent of that box that maybe you'd throw everything in a box and take to an archival repository. An external hard drive is the digital equivalent of that. Like, put everything on the external hard drive that you can, and then when you're ready to donate it, we can talk about organizing it. External hard drive is $100 or less. I would say it's a pretty valuable investment in your digital storage. So this is a shot of what those instructions look like. It's a step-by-step, click-by-click process for downloading your content. This will result in a zip file that's downloaded to your computer. And our guide tells you exactly what to expect in that file, what's included, and maybe more important, what's not included in that file. The instructions are repeated and customized for Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and Flickr. Here's something I discovered last night, and it's a good reminder. these platforms change their menu names and their options pretty often enough that we might not catch it in time to update the guide before you use it. So for instance, last night I was verifying the instructions before our session today, and I discovered that on Instagram, the menu that I needed was previously named Settings and Privacy, and now it's named Privacy and Security. So we'll need to update the instructions for that. So I want to walk you through a very brief version of what this looks like. So sorry that you're going to see some of my Facebook, but this is Facebook. And what I'm looking for over here are pages. If you have an organizational page, you have pages in your Facebook. And I'm going to show you an example from a group that I was a part of when I was in school called Tribal Libraries, Archives, and Museums. I'm going to go into the page. You don't have to write this down or memorize any of it. It's all in the guide. I just want to show you what it looks like. Over here on the left, there's a settings button. We click on settings. We go to download page. Click on download page again. And here you get a bunch of options for what you want to download. Do you want to download your posts? Do you want to download your photos and videos? What date range do you want? What format do you want? And the guide shows you and recommends all the different types of settings for this, so I'm not going to go through them. But once you're ready, then you hit create file. You're going to get I'm not going to do it right now, but you'll get a notification that says, okay, Facebook's putting together your download file for you, and then you'll get a notification when it's ready. Now, I did this earlier today so that you could see what this looks like, and this is what comes up once the file is all put together. It says file 1 of 1 here, and it's going to expire shortly, which is kind of a nice security feature. And I just hit download. I have to put in my password, which I'm not going to do right now. But what's going to happen then is that this file will download to my computer in a zip file format. You can move that. You can look at the zip file if you want to. You don't have to look at the zip file. And then you move it onto the external hard drive. That's pretty much it. I'm going to try to go back to our slideshow here. That's the gist of what everything that we're talking about is basically just download a file onto the hard drive, and you don't have to worry about organizing the files or naming the files properly. Just put them on the hard drive, and that will be a pretty good first step towards preserving your social media. All right. Let's see here. The guide also includes some pretty simple instructions for preserving your email and your website. I want to say again that because we wrote this guide specifically for non-archivist, non-tech savvy folks, we did not get deep into the best practices of email or website preservation. These steps are just the basics. So if in the paper era, again, if what we wanted you to do was put all the stuff in the box, this is one more step towards putting some more stuff in the box. So let's talk about archiving websites first. And I think Cody's putting a link to the Wayback Machine in the chat here. There's a lot more detail in the guide, as we've said several times. But I want to tell you about this pretty cool option. Some of you may or may not have heard of a tool called the Wayback Machine. The Wayback Machine is a service of the Internet Archive, which is what it sounds like. It's a digital archive of much of the internet. The Wayback Machine is a free service that visits or crawls the publicly available sites on the internet at regular intervals. It captures the websites as they look at the time of the crawl. That publicly available part of the publicly available website thing is important. The Wayback Machine does not crawl social media pages because those are not publicly available. You have to log in to use Facebook. Mostly you have to log in to interact in Twitter. You have to log in to work in Instagram. So any site that has a login is not going to be crawled by the Wayback Machine, but your organization's public-facing page probably will be. You may also know, this is a little techie, but you may also know that websites have the underlying data and then they have the display. What the Wayback Machine does is preserve the display as a snapshot in time, and will do multiple snapshots over time. It does not preserve the underlying data. And so if you want to talk about a more robust way to preserve your website, contact us and we can help you with that. I want to show you what the Wayback Machine looks like in practice. Everybody can see here the Wayback Machine on my screen. This is what that page looks like. It's pretty simple. Here you'll see a subscription service option. That's one of those not free options that we had talked about. If what you want to see is a website's look over time, you enter a URL here. Let's see. I'm going to borrow a website from that same organization that I was showing you the Facebook page from. And here's what it shows you, is that this is the calendar of all of the snapshots that the Wayback Machine has taken of this particular website. So these are all the snapshots in 2018, if you can see that up here on the top. And the bigger circles have to do with if there's more snapshots on that day. Green circles are a different type of snapshot. We don't need to get into that today. But here's what this website would have looked like on August 9th of 2018. If we click on it, it'll take us to the website shortly as it's thinking about it. So this is what that page looks like on August 9th of 2018. And you can see up at the top here that there's this menu bar that shows you that you are in a snapshot, not the live website itself. I'm going to show you what the LGBTQ-RAN page looked like. I used to have this saved in my computer. Am I getting this website right? I'm doing it from memory. Yep, sure am. Excellent. So you can see in 2020, we did a whole bunch of snapshots of this web page because we were writing the guide this summer, so we were practicing. This is what the website would have looked like on August 27th of 2020. We could also go back to the beginning of when this website started getting crawled, and that was in late 2018. We could see what the website looks like December 26th of 2018. I don't know what happened to make my computer so slow. This is what this website would have looked like at the end of 2018. The Wayback Machine does sometimes have a hard time saving media, and so it is not the perfect option. None of these are the perfect options. They are the free options. The last thing I want to show you on the Wayback Machine is this little area that says Save Page Now down here on the lower right-hand corner. If you want the Wayback Machine to make sure to crawl your website because it's not already, this is where you enter a web address and tell it to start saving the page, and then it will start crawling your website on a regular interval. All right. Okay, let's talk about email. Here's the big picture of email. It is not easy to preserve in bulk. So if you have Gmail, it's a little bit easier. If you have an email client on your computer, like Outlook or Apple Mail, not iCloud, but like an email client that's on your computer, it's fairly easy to do. Everything else is way more involved than that. The guide goes through the step-by-step instructions at a pretty high level. If this is something you want to do, let's get in touch. The fact that it's a little bit more difficult doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It just means it takes a little more persistence and dedication. This should be the part of the project where you ask yourself what you use email for, especially in the context of your LGBTQ religious work. What kinds of information is contained in those emails? What of those messages would be worth preserving for future historians? We talked to one person who had extensive and lengthy conversations in his faith community via email, and he expressed an interest in preserving those emails, but probably not every email he had ever received. Emails are also kind of tricky to talk about because they can include much more personal correspondence than the public-facing websites or social media platforms. There are privacy and ethical issues that probably merit some deeper thought. So if that's something you want to do, take a look at that section of the guide, and then we'd be happy to talk to you about it. Finally, I would imagine that some of you are thinking about all of your other digital documents like Word documents and spreadsheets and PowerPoint presentations, all the files that you use on your computer all day, every day. Again, not to sound like a broken record here, but we didn't get very deep into this because we didn't want this to be overwhelming or intimidating to get started on. We wanted you to be able to take whatever steps will work for you and for your organization. So for digital files, just like with many other files, we recommend that you regularly move or copy them to that external hard drive. And that's a really fantastic and productive start to preserving those files. If you're doing some preservation on a regular basis, just add digital files to the list of things that you copy over. Okay, that was a ton of information, some specific and some not very specific on purpose. Everyone's digital content situation is going to be a little bit different, but what we really want you to start thinking about is how that information is going to matter in the future. We'd be glad to have a conversation with you to go over what types of digital content you have and how it can be best preserved. And of course, that guide is always available to you for free. Here's our contact emails. If you want to note those, we'll put those up again a little bit later. And I think we're really looking forward to getting some questions from all of you. Thank you. Thank you for listening. Cody, will you tell us if we have questions? I'm not sure if I can get to the menu.
Yes. So there are 2 questions in the Q&A and then 2 additional ones in the chat.
Okay.
So if you would like, I'm just going to read it. So it's from Elise. It says, thank you for your each of your talks and creating the space. As a Black queer artist and researcher who collects stories of Black queer religious and spiritualist folks, I thought of eventually sharing the interviews with a particular archive that I know holds Black stories well. Can you all speak to the process of getting consent and how to select an archive? Maybe even with attention to not making powerful archives even more powerful and ensuring ivory towers are not the only places where knowledge is held.
Asati, do you want to start?
Sure. So I think Lindsay would probably, or actually Kristen, Doris, any of them would probably be better candidates to offer specific archives of which you could put your information. What I would do in terms of getting permission from the folks, if you've already interviewed them and you've gotten permission from them to utilize the interview for any purpose, then that pretty much is the permission that you have. So in order to archive it, you don't need anything additional with that because you've already done the project, and so the permissions have sort of already been taken care of. But in terms of the best practice and where to leave it, well, yeah, I mean, I would lean more so into those who are specializing in archives and have a little bit more knowledge base around what particular organizations that are available that will take care of the information. I think in terms of sort of making sure that it's not in, as you put, the ivory tower, I think the most important thing is that's really the purpose for the archive is, you know, when people are looking for the information, again, we're in this age of technology where you can pretty much Google anything, but oftentimes for really good archive organizations, they also have it to where if you Google it, it's going to come up in their archive, in the Google search, what have you. And so I think we're sort of reaching this era where more things are way more accessible for us than what they have been previously because of technology. So I wouldn't be so much worried about it not being accessible to people. But I do agree, making sure that you have it in a space where you know it's going to be safe and really cared for is important.
Yeah. And then Dan wanted to know how often should you migrate files from one external hard drive to another? For example, there are a bunch of files on a drive that he bought in 2012. When should he migrate those files to a new drive?
There are a bunch of, Cody, it was a little hard to hear you. Sorry. There are a bunch of what kinds of things on a hard drive?
Files.
Yeah, files.
Okay. I think the short answer to your question is that it depends on what kinds of files they are. And there's not really, I mean, archivists will tell you it depends is the answer for every question that we ever get. It really depends on what kinds of files they are, the shape that your external hard drive is in, I mean, like what condition it's in. There are programs that you can run on those files that are on your external hard drive to verify that they're not losing bits. It's called bit rot. And we can talk about that if you want to. But I don't think you necessarily just need to move them off the external hard drive for the sake of moving them. Like you can do a quality check every so often and go into those files and see if they still open up for you and if they're in formats that are pretty easy to open. But I don't think you need to move them just for the purpose of migrating them, especially if it's, I mean, 2012 isn't that long ago. Go take a look at them, and if they still look like they're okay, then you're probably okay for a while.
Yeah.
And additionally, he said they're primarily audio and video, and he wanted to know a little bit more about bit rot.
Oh, good. Yeah, let's get in touch. Maybe if you could put your email address in the chat, and if someone could take that down for me, let's talk about that more, because there's a whole area of something called digital preservation that is, there's a ton more information about this that I would love to share.
And I will echo sort of what Kristen said, to just sort of check your external hard drives every so often. I mean, I had one, I forget when I bought it, but I recently like plugged it into my computer and it's not being recognized now. And so I'm just like, so yeah, keep an eye on them. So sometimes they just sort of go AWOL.
And then Evan Litwin put into the chat,
Cody, can I just follow up one quick thing?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Sorry.
Kristen could talk a little bit about redundancy. I don't think that came up yet. And it's not something we're talking much about as sort of a baby first step, but it is sort of good standard practice.
So the standard redundancy rule for archivists is that or anybody who has digital content, is what we call the 3-2-1 rule. So you should have 3 copies of your digital file in 2 different places, digital places, and that one of those places should be in a different, this is going to sound funny, in a different disaster zone from where you are currently located. So for instance, if you live in a place that often gets hurricanes, you should back up your files to a cloud location that is not a place that gets hit by hurricanes. Actually, it's kind of weird, but Ohio gets the least natural disasters of anything. So there are a ton of like server buildings like full of just servers and backups in Ohio because it's considered a safe place to store a lot of your stuff in the cloud. But so that's sort of what redundancy is. You don't have to start with doing the 3-2-1 rule. You don't have to worry about having 3 versions of all of your digital files in lots of different places. The best thing to start with is just to start thinking about what content you're creating and how to preserve it. And then we can, this is like the 101 presentation. We can do a 201 presentation that has to do with redundancies and bit rot and that kind of stuff. Did that cover what you wanted me to, Doris? Yeah, okay.
And Evan Litwin wanted to know, he said that they've moved almost all of their social media outreach to Instagram over the past 1 to 2 years. And he was wondering how to best preserve that content, or if they should just save a file of everything that they post. So in other words, I think the question is asking, when the download is made, is there kind of a separation between posts, videos, and photos, or is it a single kind of file?
That's a really good question, and it differs depending on the platform. For Instagram, if I remember correctly, you get like a zip file that has several different folders within it, and I think there's posts, and then there's photos. I'm sorry, posts, and then videos, and maybe stories or something along those lines. The instructions are in the guide, and definitely like feel free to trial and error this. You're not going to break anything. I promise you won't break your Instagram. And if you go to download that file, it comes for Instagram. I know it comes to your email. They're going to send you an email in, half an hour or 3 hours or whatever it is, and say your file's ready to download. So download it, take a look at it, see what's included. If I remember correctly, and I think I do, there's not comments associated with those posts. Those don't get downloaded because that's part of that privacy stuff. So all that gets downloaded is your posts, which means that if you want to capture those comments, that's longer and more tedious, and is basically taking screenshots of every post and all of its comments. So we can talk about that more if you'd like.
And then Michael Levine wanted to ask if there were grants available to assist with this kind of work.
It's a really good question.
I know that there are, I don't obviously know the current like grant cycles. The National Institute of Museum and Library Services, it's a really long name, so I might have transposed some of those words, but they have a bunch of different grants, and I think like a digital, some form of digital is in that. National Endowment for the Humanities usually has a ton.
NHPRC, maybe National Historical Records and Publications Commission.
Yeah, and then what else? There's the New England Document Conservation Center. I think they have a lot. You just sort of look around and see. And I know here, like locally, like our city government offers like funding and grants and stuff. So you might just sort of look around.
Often I would add into that, that if you, depending on the work that you're doing, if you just sometimes look into the organizations that are offering grants for nonprofit organizations, especially, you can work the funding to speak to being able to archive as well, and being able to, especially depending on how often their cycles are, if it's like a yearly thing, you can add that into your grant, and oftentimes people will, inside tip, it sometimes helps you to get the grant. So, sometimes even if you just look at grants that don't specifically speak to archives, you can also just work those things into the grant itself, work that language into the grant, because sometimes that money that you get from another organization could also help for this archiving process.
Yep. I know that here in Wisconsin, the agency that I'm working for, Recollection Wisconsin, they support cultural heritage organizations throughout the whole state. And cultural heritage is a really broad thing. I mean, there's like an architecture firm that wants to archive their old drawings, and they're a cultural heritage organization. And any of those organizations can apply for grants through Recollection Wisconsin. And so this is a lot of acronyms. They are connected to the DPLA, which is the Digital Public Library of America, which has a hub in every state. So Google your state plus DPLA and see what your hub is, and see if whatever that organization is has some funding.
Goldie Goldberg wanted to know if the archiving feature, is that available on like WhatsApp to archive conversations?
I don't know. I haven't gone into WhatsApp. I do have teenagers, but I didn't go into WhatsApp.
I think also the question to me looks like she says the tool you referenced, and I'll just say again, the Wayback Machine is primarily for websites. I don't think that WhatsApp is a public platform. But Kristen is our pro. I'll defer to her.
I think the WhatsApp question is really good. It's similar to TikTok and some of those other apps that I haven't looked into really deeply yet. So it's a great question. And as soon as we find out, we will add it to the guide. It's a work in progress.
Perfect. That's all we have for the Q&As and in the chat.
Good. Other things that we want to know, I mean, something we would really love to know from all of you who are attending this, and you don't have to tell us right now, is, you know, what else do you want to know about on these topics? So WhatsApp is a really good question. You know, what else would be helpful for us to write as far as instructions go? I think, Doris, you were going to finish up with all this, so I'm sorry if I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but this is something that, you know, we really want to keep the conversation going with all of you. So please feel free to let us know if there's more stuff you would like to know about. We still have a few minutes if anybody wants to send more questions in.
This is Doris, not to finish up, but just to say that probably one of the important first steps, if you're even considering doing this, is that it's not a once and done thing. It's really adding a new protocol to the things that you do on a regular basis. You pay your taxes, you know, clear out your email. Downloading this, as Kristen pointed out so well, is once you do it the first time, it becomes second nature and not much harder than turning on your machine and booting up and putting in your password. But what we're going to encourage you to do is to take it seriously and to think to yourself, how much traffic is on my social media? How often would I have to do this? Who would do it? And how would I be sure that I never lost track of my hard drive or you know, the records of how this happens in my organization? If my office assistant drops dead, then am I okay? Do I still have access to all of my things? So we're really opening up not just this conversation, but we're asking people to think ahead and to plan how they would implement something that's a meaningful preservation of their long-term records. And we really want to thank you for attending, and especially thank our presenters today.